The moment our HOA president posted a for sale sign on my disabled neighbor's front lawn, without his permission, she thought she was just pushing out another inconvenient resident. What she didn't know was, he used to run the Justice Department. I've lived in Westwood Estates for nearly a decade. It's the kind of place where the houses match, the lawns are mowed to regulation length, and the Homeowners Association, or HOA, rules with the authority of a small dictatorship. At the top of that throne sat Valerie Eastman, a woman who never met a regulation she couldn't weaponize. She was known for her passive-aggressive newsletters, weekend patrols with a clipboard, and monthly fines for things as absurd as excessively festive Halloween decor. Everyone learned to lay low around Valerie. That is, until Mr. Brooks moved in. He arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. A black van pulled into the last available home on Cedar Ridge Lane, the only house that had sat unsold for months. He didn't step out right away. Instead, two men in black suits and sunglasses opened the passenger door and carefully assisted him into a sleek, black wheelchair. His movements were slow but deliberate. His eyes scanned the neighborhood, not with awe, but with the calm calculation of someone who'd seen far worse places than ours. Valerie watched from across the street, arms folded, lips pursed. From that moment on, her mission became clear. Make Mr. Brooks feel as unwelcome as possible. At first, it started with the usual nonsense. A notice about his mailbox being 2 inches too tall. Then another warning about his garage light being the wrong shade of white. And predictably, a formal citation about his unauthorized wheelchair ramp, which, ironically, had already been approved by the city under federal ADA guidelines. Mr. Brooks never raised his voice. He never attended HOA meetings, but every notice he received vanished into a neat file folder on his desk, with little handwritten notes in the margins. Valerie couldn't stand it. She thrived on reactions, on people groveling, explaining, begging. But Mr. Brooks gave her nothing, just silence and a subtle smirk when she walked by. Then came the incident. A young boy was riding his bike near Mr. Brooks's driveway when he fell and scraped his knee. His mother, clearly distraught, rang Mr. Brooks's doorbell, demanding to know why the old man's weird curb was so dangerous. Valerie was there within minutes, not to help the boy, but to add another violation to Mr. Brooks's record. By the end of that week, Valerie had sent out a community-wide email titled, "Protecting Westwood's Standards," filled with veiled threats and half-truths. Most neighbors ignored it. A few quietly sided with her. And me? I started paying closer attention. It was a Thursday morning when I saw it. A large white for sale sign hammered directly into Mr. Brooks's front lawn. I nearly spit out my coffee. The sign had the official HOA seal at the bottom, next to Valerie's name and contact number. I rushed across the street, heart pounding, snapping photos with my phone. Mr. Brooks's curtains twitched, and seconds later, his front door opened. He wheeled himself out slowly, stopped at the edge of his ramp, and stared at the sign. "What the hell is this?" I asked, walking toward him. He looked up at me with a calm I didn't understand. "The first real mistake she's made," he said. "Now I can finally do something." "What do you mean?" Mr. Brooks gave a half smile. "I've handled cases like her before. But this time, I let it slide. Because I was tired. Because I thought this place might be different." "You're saying she tried to sell your house?" "She listed it as abandoned, filed paperwork with the county, claimed I was unreachable and unresponsive. That alone is a felony under state property law." I blinked. "How do you know that?" "Because I wrote the law." That's when it hit me. The name on his mailbox, T. Brooks, Theodore Brooks, the former Deputy Attorney General of the state, the man who took down 2 real estate scams and was responsible for a national task force against fraudulent HOA practices 10 years ago. And Valerie had just handed him a legal goldmine. That evening, Valerie hosted one of her emergency HOA meetings at the community center. I showed up early. Valerie was already there, sipping lemon water and preparing her PowerPoint titled, "Enforcing Community Order." When Mr. Brooks rolled in, the room went silent. He parked himself near the front row, opened a leather binder, and simply waited. Valerie didn't even recognize him. until he raised his hand halfway through her presentation. "Yes, Mr. Brooks," he said, voice low and steady. "I have a few questions, and several copies of pending legal motions. I believe you've been served." Chaos erupted. Valerie's face turned ghost white. One of the HOA board members tried to whisper something to her, but she brushed him off. Brooks didn't flinch. "You've violated federal housing laws, disability protections, and misrepresented your authority under HOA regulations. You filed fraudulent sale documents with the county, and you've done so in writing. That's 3 separate crimes, Mrs. Eastman." Someone in the back gasped. Another neighbor stood up and said, "Wait, did you really list his house for sale?" Valerie stammered. I was told the property was vacant. I followed procedure." "No," Brooks said calmly. "You followed your own prejudice. And now the state will follow up with an audit." The meeting disbanded in chaos. Valerie rushed out, her clipboard forgotten on the podium. Mr. Brooks sat quietly, his hands folded over his binder. I walked up to him afterward. "You planned this?" He smiled faintly. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this. But when people show you who they are, you make sure they never get to do it again." As I walked home, neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering, pointing, wondering what would happen next. They had no idea. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And Valerie Eastman was about to learn what it truly meant to pick the wrong man to mess with. The morning after Mr. Brooks confronted Valerie at the HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt different. No one said it aloud, but you could feel the shift. Lawns that were once obsessively trimmed suddenly looked overgrown, not because people stopped caring, but because they were waiting, watching, wondering what Valerie would do next now that her control had been challenged in front of everyone. I saw her that morning, walking her usual route, clipboard in hand. But her gait was different, slower, less certain. The same woman who used to bark at teenagers for leaving basketballs in the driveway now avoided eye contact. Her smile tightened like it had to be pulled out of her face with string. Still, she kept checking mailboxes, jotting notes, trying to pretend everything was normal. Only it wasn't. Across the street, Mr. Lopez, a man who once paid a $300 fine for having unauthorized potted plants, was putting out new terracotta planters with wildflowers. No one stopped him. 2 houses down, the McAllisters reinstalled their porch swing that Valerie had banned 2 years ago for safety reasons. All around Westwood Estates, rules were being broken, and Valerie, she just kept walking. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived. A formal HOA summons for a special emergency executive session. It was printed on thick ivory paper with embossed gold letters, as if fancy stationery could hide the panic. Every board member was expected to attend. Homeowners weren't invited. Valerie was regrouping. But what she didn't know was that Mr. Brooks had already anticipated this. At precisely 6 p.m., the board gathered inside the Westwood clubhouse behind closed doors. Valerie sat at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by her usual allies, Douglas, her loyal treasurer with a habit of nodding at everything she said, and Denise, who handled compliance and had fined half the neighborhood for mailbox violations. She cleared her throat and began. "As you all know, recent developments have undermined our authority. The situation with Mr. Brooks has escalated." "Escalated?" muttered Denise. "He owns half the block, Valerie." Valerie shot her a glare. "And that's exactly why we need to move fast. We invoke Bylaw 9.4. Emergency vote to suspend property voting rights pending legal review." Douglas looked up. "That only applies if the homeowner is under criminal investigation." "Then maybe," Valerie whispered, "we should start one." No one spoke for a moment. That's when the door opened. Mr. Brooks walked in. Not barged, not slammed, just calmly stepped inside like he belonged there, which, legally, he now did. "Evening," he said with a polite nod, placing a thick manila folder on the table. "Before you proceed with whatever fantasy coup you've concocted, I thought I'd share a few documents I dug up." "Mr. Brooks, this is a private board meeting," Valerie snapped, rising from her chair. "Actually, as a title-holding member with controlling interest," he said, flipping open the folder. I'm entitled to be here. He pulled out several sheets. Let's start with the financial reports. Specifically, the line items labeled Community Beautification Projects. The ones that funded your backyard koi pond, Denise. And your husband's driveway repaving, Douglas. Denise paled. Douglas went rigid. Oh, and Valerie, we'll get to your retreats. 5 trips to Scottsdale listed as leadership training. Impressive. Valerie tried to speak but couldn't seem to find her voice. Brooks leaned in slightly, his tone calm but laced with steel. See, the thing about power is, it only works if people believe in it. The moment they don't, it crumbles. Like your bylaws, Valerie. Like your little empire. Outside the door, faint murmurs grew louder. Homeowners were gathering again. Brooks looked toward the sound, then back at the board. I've called a general assembly for tomorrow evening. Everyone will be there. We're voting on a full audit, bylaw revisions, and a new interim board. You can't just take over like this, Valerie hissed, eyes wide. Brooks tilted his head. Didn't you? The next day, flyers appeared on every doorstep. Simple white paper, black ink. HOA reform meeting. Let your voice be heard. That night, the clubhouse overflowed. People stood in doorways, leaned against windows. Kids sat cross-legged near the stage. Sarah Green from Elm Street read aloud the violations she'd received for leaving her garbage can out an extra hour. Mr. Gupta from Oak Terrace shared photos of Valerie's dog digging up his flower bed, while he was fined for landscape inconsistency. The stories came like a flood. When Brooks finally stepped forward, the room quieted. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rant. He just told the truth. About transparency, about misuse of power, about the need for community, not control. Then he looked at Valerie. She stood in the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. Not defeated, but finally uncertain. For the first time, she was no longer the force in the room. She was just another voice, another neighbor. When the vote was called, it wasn't close. Valerie stepped outside before the final count was even announced. As neighbors began discussing new committees, fair rules, and ways to help seniors with home maintenance, Brooks remained still, watching the door where she'd vanished. He knew this wasn't the end. Valerie Thompson wasn't the kind of woman to disappear quietly. She'd spent years building her kingdom, brick by controlling brick. And people like her, they always came back. Only this time, Brooks would be ready. Because while she was out there plotting revenge, he was building something better. A neighborhood run by trust, not fear. And this time, the rules would work for everyone. Even Valerie. If she dared return. The first week after the vote felt like a fresh breeze had swept through Westwood Estates. Mailboxes that were once cloned in HOA-mandated beige were now repainted in soft pastels and deep forest greens. Children chalked colorful designs across sidewalks that had once been scrubbed clean by order. The fences were still straight, the lawns still trimmed. But something had shifted. People smiled again, lingered at each other's porches, laughed without looking over their shoulders. But not everyone was smiling. Valerie's blinds remained shut. Her once pristine lawn was now slightly overgrown, not enough to draw attention, but enough to say she'd stopped caring about the rules she once enforced like gospel. She hadn't attended a single community gathering. Not the town hall that finalized the new interim board. Not the pancake breakfast fundraiser. Not even the block-wide spring cleanup where even the teenagers showed up with rakes and music blasting from portable speakers. Mr. Brooks had kept his promise to stay in the background, guiding from behind the scenes, letting others take the microphone. He didn't want a crown, he just wanted peace. So when the first anonymous letter arrived, it took him a moment to understand what it meant. It was a simple sheet of white paper, typed in bold black font. No signature, no return address, just one sentence. You may control the votes, but some of us remember who belongs here, and who doesn't. Brooks stared at the paper for a long time, before folding it and slipping it into the drawer beside his kitchen sink. He didn't tell anyone, not yet. Maybe it was just someone blowing off steam. A sore loser. He'd wait and watch. But the next day, Denise called. They egged my house last night, she said. her voice tight. "I thought it was kids, but then I found this." She sent him a picture of the same typed note, this one taped to her door. Her name was scribbled across the bottom in red pen. A third call came later that week, from Mr. Gupta. Someone had dumped a bag of nails in his driveway. 2 flat tires. 3 notes. All the same font. All unsigned. That night, Brooks walked the perimeter of Westwood Estates. Not as the silent investor. Not as the reformist. But as a man trying to protect what he helped rebuild. He passed homes filled with laughter. Backyards glowing with fairy lights. Neighbors playing cards in open garages. But the shadows felt different. Too still. Too deliberate. And every so often, he'd glance at Valerie's house. Dark. Quiet. Its windows like unblinking eyes. He didn't want to believe she was behind it. Didn't want to believe she'd stoop this low. But then came the fire. It started just before midnight, a low crackling hiss in the backyard of the community center. The same one Valerie once ruled like a queen, and which the new board had repurposed as a shared space for events, classes, and meetings. Brooks got the call at 12:07 a.m. By the time he arrived, half the back patio was gone. Charred beams collapsed into a heap, smoke still twisting into the sky. The fire department had acted fast. No injuries, no nearby homes damaged. But the message had been sent. Someone didn't want this version of Westwood Estates to survive. A fire marshal handed him the report before the sun came up. "Accelerants were used," he said plainly. "Gasoline. This wasn't an accident." Brooks didn't speak. He just nodded. But inside, something had snapped. Later that morning, the board gathered at his house. Denise, Mr. Gupta, Sarah Green, and 2 new residents who'd been voted in after the reforms. People he trusted. They spread out the evidence. Photos of the notes, screenshots of suspicious messages on the old HOA's community app. Strange withdrawals that predated the board audit. "This is retaliation," Sarah said. "And not just from one person. Someone's helping her." "Multiple someones," Mr. Gupta added. "She's building something," Denise said. "A shadow board, a power structure, underground, off the books." Brooks didn't speak for a while. He just stared at the community center flyer taped to his fridge. "Westwood belongs to all of us." And thought about the fire, the fear creeping back into the neighborhood like smoke through old vents. Then he stood. "We're not going to fight them with fines or bylaws," he said. "We do what they never could." "Which is?" He looked each of them in the eye. "We tell the truth, loudly." The plan took shape fast, not just press coverage, but a community forum. Open, recorded, and public. Not about revenge, but transparency. A complete digital archive of what the HOA had been, what it had become, and who had resisted change at every turn. Brooks knew the risk. He'd seen what retaliation looked like, but he also knew the truth scared people like Valerie more than any vote ever could. She had ruled with secrets. He would fight with light. And he wouldn't be alone, because this time, Westwood wasn't afraid. The Westwood Community Forum was scheduled for a Thursday evening, just past sundown. Flyers had been hand-delivered to every house. Posters hung in windows, stapled to light posts. The event was simple in design, but explosive in intent. An open-air gathering where residents could share their experiences, uncensored, unmoderated, and on record. By 6:45 p.m., the park across from the old community center was filled with folding chairs, a projection screen, and 2 mounted cameras. Brooks had asked a local university student to live stream the event. "Let the world see what happens when a neighborhood reclaims its voice," he'd said. But as the crowd gathered, and neighbors exchanged nervous greetings, tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Some people had brought blankets. Others clutched cups of coffee. A few, mostly Valerie's old allies, stood near the edge, arms crossed, eyes scanning every detail like it was all some kind of trap. Brooks took the stage at 7:05 p.m. "I never thought I'd be here," he began, voice steady but tight. 5 months ago, I didn't even live here full-time. I just wanted to restore some balance. Fix a few things quietly. But it's clear now that silence is part of what let things get so broken." He paused, letting the murmurs fade. "So tonight, we speak. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with truth. Denise came up next, reading 3 violation letters she'd received for planting butterfly-attracting flowers instead of HOA-approved shrubs. Each letter had her name misspelled. Mr. Gupta followed, recounting the time he was fined for painting his porch light the wrong shade of white. He held up the light bulb like a courtroom exhibit, drawing a ripple of laughter. Then came Sarah Green. Quiet, soft-spoken. She told how she'd once offered to join the board and been laughed out of the room. "They said I didn't have the right image," she said. "I didn't know image meant obedience." The air shifted. It was working. People raised their hands. One by one they stepped forward. Single mothers, veterans, elderly couples, each sharing the same pattern. Pettiness wrapped in official language, isolation enforced by selective enforcement, kindness mistaken for weakness. Brooks watched from the side, pride and fury braided in his chest. And then, without warning, Valerie arrived. She stepped out of a black SUV with tinted windows, dressed not in workout gear, but in a sharp navy pantsuit. Her lips pressed thin, her gaze unwavering. She didn't walk. She glided. Her heels didn't click. They struck. For a moment, the microphone went quiet. Someone whispered, "She came." Brooks stepped forward calmly and handed her the mic. She didn't hesitate. "This is a smear campaign," she said coolly, "built on half-truths and emotional manipulation. I served this community for over a decade. I enforced the rules we all agreed to, the same rules that protected your property values and your safety." A few people clapped. Not many. "You call this transparency?" she went on. "I call it mob justice. And I won't let the legacy of Westwood be destroyed by emotional theatrics and social media hysteria." Brooks stepped forward again, voice steady. "Then stay. Hear the rest. Defend your legacy." But Valerie shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You think you've won. But I built this neighborhood. I know where the weak spots are." She dropped the mic, literally, and walked back to her SUV without another word. The silence she left behind wasn't victory. It was a warning. Later that night, after the forum ended and most neighbors had returned home, Brooks lingered behind with Denise and Mr. Gupta. They helped stack chairs in the dark, the only light coming from the screen still playing replay footage from earlier speakers. "We hit a nerve," Denise said quietly. "We always were going to," Gupta replied. Brooks nodded but said nothing. The footage from the cameras had been uploaded already. The comments section beneath the stream was exploding. Thousands of viewers chiming in, some outraged, some inspired, some vowing to attend their own HOA meetings for the first time. But Brooks' eyes were fixed on something else. A text on his phone. It had no name, just a number. One he didn't recognize. "Watch your step." Valerie wasn't alone. His jaw tightened. The forum had revealed something critical. Valerie didn't just represent the past. She was planning something. And she had help. What Brooks didn't know yet, what none of them could have known, was that deep inside a storage unit on the other side of town, boxes were being pulled out. Boxes filled with HOA records that had never been filed publicly. Documents that showed years of unreported fees, illegal evictions, even forged signatures on bylaw amendments. Valerie hadn't come to the forum to defend herself. She had come to measure her enemy. And now, the real war for Westwood was about to begin. The morning after the forum, Westwood didn't feel like the same neighborhood anymore. For the first time in years, Brooks noticed neighbors pausing to greet each other. Conversations that once stopped at awkward nods now stretched into shared frustrations, cautious laughs, even plans. Something had cracked open, and not even Valerie's dramatic exit could fully close it. But beneath the warmth was tension. Everyone felt it, like a second storm forming behind the first. Brooks stood in his kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, when the knock came. Sharp. Precise. He opened the door to find Denise, holding a thick folder and wearing an expression that meant trouble. "You should see this," she said, stepping past him before being invited in. Inside the folder were photocopies, dozens of them. Financial ledgers, violation records, Board memos, all unsigned, all marked internal use only. Where did this come from? Brooks asked. Anonymous drop at the community mailbox, she replied. No return label, no note. Just a sticky with your name on it. He flipped through the pages. Monthly dues reported as higher than what residents had actually paid. Landscaping budgets that quadrupled with no visible change. Multiple payments to companies that didn't exist on public registries. And buried near the back, photocopies of checks made out to Valerie Holdings LLC. Brooks stared at the name. That's Valerie's shell company, he whispered. She used it to buy foreclosed homes in other neighborhoods. And to collect HOA payments here, Denise said grimly. Illegally. A beat of silence passed between them. Do we go public with this? She asked. Brooks didn't answer immediately. Because something in his gut told him this wasn't just a scandal. It was bait. That evening, under the pretense of a neighborhood cleanup project, Brooks met quietly with Mr. Gupta near the tennis courts. One of the few HOA-funded projects that had never actually been finished. They sat on an overturned bench, pretending to sort litter. I trust Denise, Brooks said, but this drop feels planted. Gupta nodded. A trap, you think? Or a warning? Valerie's too controlled to make mistakes. She wants us to react before we're ready. They agreed on a new plan. No announcements, no accusations, just quiet investigation. If Valerie had skeletons in the closet, Brooks wanted to know exactly how many and where she kept the keys. That night, Denise emailed a contact at the county records office. Mr. Gupta reached out to a retired CPA he knew from his banking days. Brooks called his cousin, a software analyst with a knack for scraping public data from HOA websites. 3 days later, the first threads started to unravel. Valerie Holdings didn't just manage Westwood's reserve funds. It also controlled the emergency relief budget, money supposedly allocated for storm damage, medical hardship, and community projects. Except it had never been used for any of those things. Instead, the money had flowed steadily toward 3 consulting firms, all linked to Valerie's cousin, her son-in-law, and a former board member's real estate business. It's a spider web, Denise muttered over their weekly kitchen table meeting. Layer after layer of deception. She covered her tracks, but not completely. Brooks rubbed his temples. This is big enough to take her down permanently. But it's also big enough to draw fire, Mr. Gupta warned. We expose this. We don't just threaten her reputation. We threaten her livelihood. That night, the retaliation began. First came the fines. Brooks found a fresh violation letter taped to his mailbox the next morning. Unkempt lawn. His grass had been cut 2 days ago. Denise got one too. Improper waste bin placement. Mr. Gupta? Obstructed curb line visibility. The handwriting wasn't Karen's, nor Valerie's. It was typed, sterile, emotionless. But the message was clear. Later that evening, a series of HOA emails went out. From the Interim Compliance Committee, announcing new audits, stricter enforcement, and an emergency meeting to reassess leadership procedures. Brooks stared at the email, heart sinking. She's not just fighting back, he murmured. She's reclaiming control. He knew what this meant. Valerie was organizing, and she wasn't doing it alone. The board members who had once drifted away were suddenly resurfacing. One by one, old allies were poking their heads into committee meetings, resurrecting defunct subgroups, offering to help stabilize the community. It was a counter-offensive. Brooks called a late-night meeting at Denise's house. Half the forum's speakers attended. A few others joined quietly, faces nervous but determined. We either push forward now, he said, or this entire thing collapses back into silence. They voted unanimously. It was time to go public, with everything. But first, they needed a space Valerie couldn't control. The local library had a meeting room, neutral ground, no HOA jurisdiction. Brooks booked it under his own name. A town hall, he called it. No microphones, no cameras, just residents, facts, and truth. It would take place in 48 hours. But Valerie already knew. Because one of the flyers Brooks printed was never delivered. It was stolen, right off the printer tray by someone he didn't yet suspect. And that flyer now sat on Valerie's kitchen counter, beside a glass of wine, a burner phone, and a printed map of the neighborhood marked with red X's. The war wasn't coming. It had already begun. 2 days. That's all they had. 2 days to prepare for a community meeting that could decide the fate of Westwood, and potentially expose one of the most corrupt HOA leadership structures in the state. Brooks felt the pressure in his chest like a weight he couldn't shift. Every phone call, every flyer delivery, every whispered conversation with neighbors felt like threading a needle during an earthquake. But still, they moved. Gupta worked on organizing documents, clean, simple, undeniable evidence of financial misconduct. Denise reached out to former HOA members who'd left quietly in past years, hoping to build a broader coalition. And Brooks? He walked, house to house, face to face. He didn't ask for trust. He just offered one sentence. You deserve to know what's been done with your money. That was enough. By the night before the town hall, over 80 residents had confirmed attendance. The local librarian had to unlock folding chairs from storage. There was momentum. But not everyone was on their side. At exactly 3 a.m., Brooks's motion sensor camera blinked red. Someone was at his mailbox. He rewound the footage, heart racing. The figure wore black, hood up, gloves on. They dropped a thick envelope inside and walked away quickly. No vandalism, no spray paint, just silence. He opened the envelope with careful hands. Inside were photographs, private ones, of him and his ex-partner, at a retreat, at a fundraiser, at a dinner. Things he'd never posted. Some dating back years, clearly obtained through invasive means, and underneath them, an unsigned note. Leadership should come from those with nothing to hide. Brooks didn't sleep that night. By morning, the rumor had already started, a whisper campaign spreading through chain emails and anonymous HOA forums. The narrative was predictable. Brooks has an agenda. He's trying to take over the HOA for personal reasons. He's using community outrage to distract from his own legal issues. Legal issues that didn't exist, but truth wasn't the point. Fear was. By noon, 2 residents who had promised to speak at the town hall texted Denise to say they'd changed their minds. One even apologized. I just can't afford the fallout. Gupta wanted to go public immediately. We show the documents, tonight. Let them know we're not afraid. But Brooks shook his head. Number. That's what Valerie wants. A reaction. A misstep. Instead, they focused inward. That afternoon, Sarah Jenkins, the same resident who had once stood up for Brooks during a meeting, knocked on his door. Her hands were trembling. They came to my house last night, she whispered. Not Valerie. A man. Said if I spoke tomorrow my family's landscaping business would lose its HOA contract. Did he say who he was? No name. Just threats. Brooks nodded. Then we're closer than I thought. That evening, as the sun dipped below the sycamore trees lining Westwood Lane, the trap finally revealed itself. Denise got a call from the city clerk's office. Apparently, someone had submitted a complaint, claiming the library town hall meeting was a political event disguised as a community forum. Technically, those required a permit. Without one, the meeting could be shut down by law enforcement. Who filed the complaint? Brooks asked. The clerk hesitated, then answered quietly. Karen Thompson. The name hit like a hammer. Karen, Valerie's old friend. The same woman who had once fined a cancer survivor for their trash cans being visible on recycling day. She'd left the board a year ago, or so everyone thought, but she never really left. Valerie had been rebuilding her army in the shadows, and now she had every intention of turning the town hall into a disaster. Brooks exhaled slowly. We hold the meeting anyway, he said. It's a trap, Gupta warned. I know, but we've come too far. That night, Denise's back window shattered. A rock, wrapped in newspaper. No note this time, just silence. They didn't call the police. They called each other. And together, sitting in the soft glow of Brooks's kitchen lamp, they made one final decision. Tomorrow, They wouldn't just expose the corruption. They would end it. The meeting began with silence. No angry voices, no accusations. Just neighbors walking into the Westwood Library's community room. Eyes wide, hearts unsure. Rows of metal chairs filled within minutes. Brooke stood near the side wall, watching them come in. Parents with toddlers. Retirees with folded HOA letters in their coat pockets. Young couples gripping each other's hands. They came despite the threats. They came because silence had cost them too much. Denise handed out stapled documents, copies of the HOA's expense reports, doctored by Valerie's board. Gupta stood near the projector, ready to walk through the financial trails that had led them here. Brooks approached the front. He didn't take the stage. Instead, he stood in the center aisle, among the people. He held a single sheet of paper in his hand and began to speak. "I'm not here as your leader," he said. "I'm here as your neighbor. And like many of you, I've been fined, ignored, and threatened into thinking I couldn't do anything about it." He paused. "But that ends tonight." He held up the paper. "This is a copy of the deed to my property. You've seen it before. It's how Valerie tried to silence me." A low ripple moved through the room. "But you know what it also is? It's proof that I played by every rule, that I paid every fee. And still, they came after me." He looked toward the back of the room where Valerie herself had just entered. She wore a dark green suit, sharp, professional, flanked by Karen Thompson and two lawyers in gray. Perfectly timed. The tension in the room shifted. Valerie's presence was a silent warning. "You don't control this room. I do." But Brooks didn't flinch. He gestured to Gupta, who dimmed the lights and started the slideshow. Slide 1. A $9,800 landscaping fee, listed under Community Beautification. Slide 2. A receipt, dated the same week, for patio work at Valerie's private home, billed by the same company. Slide 3. An email from Karen, approving the payment with the note, "Let's keep this off the regular minutes." Murmurs filled the room. "Let's keep going," Brooks said, his voice steady. Gupta clicked through more slides. Ghost contractors, duplicated invoices, forged approval signatures. Then came Denise's big moment. She walked forward holding a physical ledger. "This is from a former board member who kept backup records, something Valerie didn't know about. It proves that over $142,000 of HOA funds were funneled into a private escrow account owned by a shell company called Green Ridge Consulting." She clicked to the final slide, an image of the company registration form, registered to Valerie's brother. The room exploded in gasps and rising voices. Valerie stood abruptly. "This is slander." "No," Brooks replied calmly. "This is math." The lawyers whispered something to her. She didn't sit back down. Instead, she marched toward the center aisle. "You people think you understand community management? You want chaos? Do you think you'll survive without structure? Without someone to keep things in order? I built Westwood." Sarah Jenkins stood up from the back row. "No, you built fear." More neighbors stood with her, one by one. Mr. Chen, the high school teacher, the Patel family, Mrs. Jenkins, then Denise, then Gupta. In a moment that felt almost cinematic, every Rao slowly rose to their feet, united, unafraid. Valerie's voice faltered, her mask cracked. "Fine," she snapped. "If you all think you can do better, go ahead. Good luck keeping your trash cans aligned." She stormed out. Karen scrambled behind her, phone to her ear, muttering something about a court order. But nobody followed. Not anymore. By midnight, a motion had been passed. Dissolve the current HOA board. A vote followed. 86-3 in favor. Brooks, Denise, and Gupta were appointed as interim board leaders until a full election could be held. The crowd cheered, not out of celebration, but out of relief. For the first time in years, Westwood felt like it belonged to the people who lived there. Outside, under the soft flicker of street lamps, neighbors hugged, shared numbers, offered to help rebuild what had been broken, not just structurally, but emotionally. The next morning, Brooks walked past the notice board where Valerie's HOA newsletters had once been pinned in bold, controlling fonts. In its place, Denise had posted a hand-painted sign. "Welcome to Westwood, where neighbors make the rules." 2 weeks later, they held the first Westwood Together block party. Mr. Chen grilled ribs. The Patel kids ran through sprinklers. Sarah Jenkins set up a table for community ideas and future bylaws. Brooks sat in a folding chair, paper plate in hand, watching the sunset paint the houses golden. A young couple passed by with a baby stroller. The woman smiled. "We're the new owners at Lot 23. Heard what you did." "Thank you." He smiled back. "I didn't do it alone." And as laughter echoed through the street once haunted by silence, Brooks realized something deeper. Valerie hadn't just underestimated him. She had underestimated what a community could become when it chose courage over compliance. The real power in Westwood was never in the rules. It was always in the people. And this time, they weren't giving it back.